各位，当外界把人工智能竞赛简化为谁会赢谁会输的时候，真正支撑这一场竞赛的底层逻辑却很少被认真讨论。在彭博士对艾斯摩尔首席执行官这一次专访中，一个关键的信号被反复的提及：光刻技术不会消失，只会不断的升级。而围绕它展开的不是短期的博弈，而是一场持续10年以上的产业结构重塑。这一期内容的核心矛盾，正是技术不可替代性的地缘政治试图人为切断之间的张力。而过去一段时间，围绕 AI 泡沫、芯片投资过热、算力军备竞赛的讨论明显升温。从美国到欧洲，再到中国，资本、政府、企业同时在加码，看似情绪高涨，却也伴随着质疑。但在中国角度的视觉下，这并不完全是投机的周期，而是一次由底层技术推进的产业扩容。当晶体管密度、先进封装、数据规模同步跃迁，单点突破已经无法支撑需求的时候，整个制造体系将会被迫往前推进。而真正的核心矛盾在于，人工智能的发展并不取决于谁先喊停，而是取决于谁能持续构建完整的能力。从极紫外光刻 EUV 走向更高数值孔径的高 MA 的光刻时代，再到未来的超高数值孔径，光刻技术本身依然在演进中。而当平面微缩接近极限的时候， 3D 封装与系统级的整合将成为必然的路径。中西的差异并不在于是否看这一条路线，而是在于是否愿意为10年周期持续投入。当一方试图通过限制技术流动来延缓对手，另一方却被迫的启动全链条自研，长期结果反而可能会加速能力的分化。从结构落点来看，中国并非选择是否参与，而是别无选择，只能参与。在拥有庞大市场与完整的制造基础的前提下，技术被切断只会把依赖关系转为内部动力。对于艾斯莫尔而言，对中国提供代际落后的设备也许会短期内延迟进度，但却无法改变方向。对全球产业而言，真正的变量不是能拖多久，而是如何在竞争、开放与安全之间找到一个可续的平衡。这才是理解这一次访谈的现实入口。让我们来看一下视频。
Lithography will always be there, right? Because you cannot do anything with lithography. And there will always be the wish to get better lithography. Better lithography means better resolution, better accuracy, and better productivity. And we're going to work basically on those 3 axes for many, many years. If we look at lithography in ASML today, thanks to EUV, we most probably know what to do for our customer for the next 10 to 15 years. And the next 10 to 15 years, we'll still see major innovation in lithography in order to continue to work with our customer on cost and transistor density. So that's the first thing. We do low NA today. We just talked about high-NA. We may, at some point of time, also to introduce even the higher numerical aperture tool, which we call Hyper-NA. That's the 0.75 tool. Basically,
Hyper-NA.
Hyper-NA. So this could come,
when does Hyper-NA come then?
most probably middle of the next decade. So we still have time. We still have time. But that's still something we are preparing for, because as you said, we have to look long term.
You're also pushing into advanced packaging or 3D packaging, and this is essentially where you get the components, instead of laying them out flat, kind of
Correct.
urban sprawl style, you build them up a bit like a skyscraper.
Correct.
What is the importance of that? How significant will that be for ASML? And why focus on that packaging?
Yeah,
solution?
so two reasons why this is becoming important. So the first thing is our customers are continuing to drive for more transistor density. So the Moore's law we usually refer to is calling for doubling transistor density every 2 years. And this has been going on for many years, and it still keeps going. In fact, if you look at AI customers, so you mentioned NVIDIA before, they want even more than that. So they don't want to get the transistor density to double every 2 years. They would like the number of transistors to go up by a factor of 16 every 2 years. That's what we have seen happening in the last 2-3 years. So you're going completely off Moore's law, and you need even more transistor. Now, we still use lithography to try to put as many transistors as possible per unit of area, but that's not enough. And if you cannot get enough transistor, as you showed doing this, then you also have to do that.
On AI, you made a big step by investing almost $1.5 billion US in Mistral, which is one of the leading large language model companies in Europe, certainly a competitor to the likes of OpenAI and Gemini and Anthropic. You've taken about a 10% stake with that deal. Why?
Well, we saw AI as also a huge opportunity for ASML. If you look at ASML, we invest a lot in R&D, 4.5 billion euro every year to develop our product. And of course, we invest a lot in hardware. We also invest a lot of software. And we saw that when it comes to development cycle, AI could help us enormously. With the software, of course, like many companies. But for us to be able to ship our machine to our customer and have people to maintain those machines on the field, we are writing a huge amount of procedure. Right? We spend a lot of time describing on paper how our tool works so that people can deal with it. And there also AI can help us to really reduce the time our engineers spend on that so that we free them to do other things, like, for example, 3D integration. So we saw a major efficiency opportunity with AI. More importantly, we also believe that AI can improve our product because our product generates tons of data.
Are we in an AI bubble?
Well, when people talk about AI bubble, I don't know exactly what they mean. And usually I say there's two ways to look at it. If you look at the industry, I don't think there is a bubble. So the impact of AI on the industry is just starting. And the impact on the industry will be positive for many years to come. So there is no bubble. I think that the value of AI, the industrial value of AI is extremely high. And this will be developing over time. There's no bubble because, like I say, we're just starting. Sometimes people talk about a bubble in reference to the stock market because we have seen some company getting extremely high valuation as a result of the excitement of AI. There, I think what you will see is more players coming over time. So initially, a few companies were, I would say, very much the only winner out of AI. Because of the demand, because the industrial demand will be so high, we need more players. And you will see more and more companies designing chips, designing AI product, manufacturing chips, etc., etc. And that could create, of course, some change on the stock market. But, the two are a bit unrelated.
Because that commitment, $300 billion just this year alone from the hyperscalers, maybe $400 billion next year, that translates into real orders for your kit in the years ahead. You start to see that.
Over time. And sometimes, the last few months I used to joke with some of our investors because they told us, well, 200 billion here, 500 billion here. I say, well, I still don't have the equation to translate those orders into order for us. And it takes a bit of time. But you're right. Over time, that demand translate into cheap demand to our customer.
Yeah.
This translate into a need for more capacity, and this translate into demand for ASML and our peers in the industry.
The infrastructure spend from the hyperscalers and the kind of deal making that OpenAI has done, almost $1 trillion worth of deals committed just by that one company alone, which isn't making a profit this year. That makes sense to you?
Well, I think the investment makes sense overall because you cannot play in AI without investing in hyperscaler. And there may be even a few cycles of investment because the investment today is done on certain chips. The chips in 2-3 years from now, if you look at NVIDIA announcement, they will be a lot more powerful. And people may be tempted again in 2027 to invest again in hyperscaler to make use of those chips. So you have different cycle, and you have a bit of a arms race because if you don't invest today, you're out. Right? That's true for company. I think it's true also for government. You cannot not play in AI, and I think that's why you have this huge backlog of demand.
You touched on one part of this, which is the pace of innovation And it makes me think of depreciation around some of these assets, particularly when you spend heavily on Blackwell, and then we've got Rubin coming up as one example.
Yeah.
Good news for you, because you benefit from that increased investment that's going to have to follow that. But some are going to get burned by that depreciating asset, presumably.
Could be. I think, it's a bit what I said. You have a certain landscape when you start. The opportunity is big. You will see more and more players. Will everyone win? I don't know. But the opportunity is such that there will be more and more people entering the business. And time will say who makes the right turn, who makes the right decision, the right investment, etc., etc. But the opportunity will, I think on the short term, you will see first more player, and then at some point you may see a consolidation or a change. This is very natural in this kind of industry, but it's too big for people to not want to play in today. Well, I think today the US are far ahead of China when it comes to AI. I mean, NVIDIA is a good example of that, of course. Everyone in China wants to buy chips from NVIDIA. If you look at the ecosystem, also 80% of the most advanced chips are bought in the United States. So I think that the ecosystem in the United States is extremely strong when it comes to AI. I think companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, forget some of them, are going to drive, I would say, the development of AI very, very strongly.
Does Europe become a consumer of US and Chinese AI, or a producer and builder of AI?
Today, I think this is clearly a consumer. If you look at the overall AI ecosystem in Europe, it's very weak in any way you look at it. And, today there could be a debate about will the US or China win the AI race. I think it's clear who is losing it today. It's Europe. Europe is behind. And it's true with semiconductor, right? If you look at semiconductor, basically, take our shipment. The shipment of our system to Europe today is maybe 1 or 2% of our total business. And that's been the case for the last 10 years. So there is no buildup of semiconductor manufacturing in Europe. Not advanced, not mature. Why is that? Is because there is also no consumption of semiconductor in Europe. Most of the consumption, as I said, of advanced chips are in the US because the company that develop the AI chips are not here. So Europe is behind, and to catch up, Europe has to create the condition basically to attract this entire ecosystem back to Europe.
ASML has no plans to leave the Netherlands, its home for over 40 years, but as the AI revolution unfolds, with the US well ahead and China making an aggressive effort to catch up, is it a case of too little too late for Europe?
I get from you speaking to you that you are genuinely concerned that Europe is losing this AI race. Is that fair? And what are the implications of a Europe that loses on this?
Well, I think the implication is that we become consumers, as you said before. So we will have access to the technology. We may even have some data centers that are built in Europe here and there, but the knowledge will not be here for most of it. So that's the concern. We talk a lot about sovereignty in Europe. If you want sovereignty, you need to make sure that you are going to play not on one part of the ecosystem.
And you talked about the role of China, and we've been reminded of how closely linked we are to the supply chains of China in recent weeks and months, where it's rare earths or the kind of chips, legacy chips that the auto industry, for example, is so dependent on, companies like Nexperia, Chinese owned, but based in the Netherlands. On rare earths, is there ever a place where Europe is not dependent on China on rare earths?
It's difficult for me to say because I'm not an expert there. I think that, most probably we need to develop a much bigger supply chain, so maybe not depending fully on China. I don't know how much we have in Europe, so that's also why it's important to keep some of those markets open. I think you're right. The interdependencies we have between, us, China, the US is being reminded to us every day, right? As everyday example of that. So we have to also work a bit harder to make sure that the market remains open.
And in the past, you've been an advocate for continuing to have exposure to the Chinese market. It's still obviously a significant market for ASML.
Yes.
And your case is we should be providing that technology. Otherwise, China's going to become competitive and start to take that market share. Is that still where you would land on that debate?
Well, it's back to the race, right? So China will not accept to be cut off from technology. Right, if you have 1.4 billion people, you want to advance. So this is just a reality. Then I think the West could make the choice to continue to keep China behind by saying, well, we're not going to provide them the latest and greatest product, but we could provide the third, the fourth, or the fifth generation. Today, the product we ship to China are 8 generations behind our INA tool we talked about it. So we're quite far behind. The tool we ship to China, we were shipping to our customer in the Western world in 2013, 2014. So it's more than 10 years. And China, of course, is suffering from that. Their technology progress has slowed down. Now the question is, how far do you push that? Do we keep them behind 5, 10, 15 years? Not for me to decide. Or do we frustrate them to the point where they have no choice but to stop depending on Western technology, which for us it means on the long term that part of the trade is gone. They develop their own product, which they have done already for many things, and at some point of time they could even come back to us and sell those products. So I think it's mostly time to find the right balance between, the frustration, the delay, and what could be the consequence of that. And I think that the right question is most probably, how far behind do we want China to be?